Today on Match Play.
Hit it, hit it.
Match Play. Match Play. Match Play.
I'm very pleased to welcome in this segment Jeff Blume. He's the current president of the American Society of Golf Course Architects. Well, at least for a couple more days,
Couple
right,
more
Jeff?
days, that's right.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Jeff, let's go right at it. Where did you get started in golf and transition us into becoming an architect?
Sure. Well, I started my career with Jeff Brower and Robert Von Hagge were my two mentors. But I was a high school player, somewhat accomplished high school player. Talked to my dad when I was 17. I had one scholarship offer to go play college golf, and he said, "You think you can make a living playing golf?" And I said, "Well, no."
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up kind of all over. My dad was a fighter pilot. It was fun, but I grew up in Europe. I grew up in Texas. I grew up in a lot of different places, but Houston's home now.
So all the various places you grew up, you also then played golf in all these places, I'm presuming, as you grew. How did that get ingrained into your passion to later become a designer?
Well, the first golf I ever experienced was with my grandfather and my dad. My grandfather lived to be 105, played golf till he was 101.
Well, you've got a good future going.
Well, on half of the family at least.
Okay.
So that was in Texas, kind of flatland, Houston golf. But I really took the game up when my dad was stationed at Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany. So that's where I really learned to play. They were more Parkland-style golf courses. Actually, I think Bobby's dad had done the golf course there at Ramstein. But then we moved to Alabama and up to Northern Virginia, and so I got a little bit of different taste of all of it. I love desert golf. I love what we did here today and what we're going to do here this week.
Sure.
That's one of the unique things about golf and golf courses is just the different environments and the different settings you get, and you don't need to change that. Stay with what's natural. Stay with what's vernacular.
Tell us a little bit about some of your design philosophy. What is specific and special that if we go to a Jeff Blume golf course, we're going to know that we've been there?
Sure. Well, my training, as I said, I started my career with a guy named Jeff Brower, who's also a society member, former president. He was in Dallas, Texas, in Arlington, actually. And I had done some work when I was in college with Robert Von Hagge, who was down in Houston. And so I worked for Jeff for about 3 years, and Jeff was just as sound a technical architect as you could find, a great guy to learn how to design a golf course from. And then I went to Von Hagge, and he was completely the opposite. He was the consummate showman. He didn't want to make a decision until the last minute. He was not a plan-oriented guy.
Was that frustrating?
Well, it was interesting. It was interesting to see both sides. Bob was a real artist. He was just a real showman and a great salesman, and so I got kind of both sides. I got a great mentor on the technical side and a great mentor on the business and artistic side, and that's served me well, as I've now been in business, I guess, for 22 years.
How do we know we're playing a Jeff Blume golf course?
Well, typically what we're going to do is more of a traditional style. I find that architects evolve over time. I think all of us do. Mr. Von Hagge was big into mounds and capturing shadow and all of that, so there's still some of that in my design. I've gone away from the mound so much, I got a little tired of that. So now we'll do a more traditional kind of long slopes. We want to be very playable, but we got to give them something dramatic to look at, so they experience a great game, but also a great day while they're out there. You got to remember that if 4 people are playing golf, one guy's hitting the shot, and the rest of them are looking around.
Yes.
And we're trying to give them a good environment.
Something to look at.
That's right.
You bet. Wow, isn't that wonderful? What a great thought. Yeah. Renovation, the big word in golf course design and architecture. Now, not building many new golf courses anywhere,
right?
Because we have so many and overbuilt them back during the big heyday.
Right.
So now you're renovating those courses. What do you do when they ask you to renovate a golf course that's 40, 50, 80, maybe 100 years old, and you want to maintain the integrity and the historicity, but
well,
you've got to make it playable for today and update it and modernize it.
Absolutely.
How do you do it?
Well, I think you have to look at the property, you have to look at the membership, you have to look at who is your client. Sometimes you can go in and do a blow up and do something that you want to do yourself.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you've got to be conscious of the history of that club. We did one north of Houston. It was just a little 9-holer. Conroe Country Club was in. Was the oldest golf course north of Houston. It was built in the 30s. It was a wonderful little 9-hole course. Country Club. And they wanted to keep it intact. It was an old John Bredemus design. Well, we renovated the place, and you know, we kept it very simple, very soft. Something that he would have done. You know, I just got finished renovating one of Jay Morris's golf courses.
Can you comment on the difference between a golf course architect that is and was a famous player, like a Nicklaus, a Palmer, a Norman, and then there's, you know, great female players that became architects too along the way. I think of Amy Alcott, I think of Annika. We could keep going. Lorena, who was on this show. And then a golf course architect like yourself and so many of the others that were not as prolific, they were not famous as far as in the public eye famous.
Well, I don't know that it's necessarily that much different. Budgets are certainly different sometimes. You know, obviously Jack or the Jones boys or Pete Dye or someone at that level is designing with very large budget. They have the opportunity to do more things sometimes. But I think you know, the way to design a golf course, there's so many different ways to do it. One of the things that you see nowadays is there's guys that are design-build guys that like to spend a lot of time on machines, and they don't draw much plan work, and they just go out and they build it. Coor Crenshaw are certainly that way. And I think, so you have that, you have the guys who are the plan-based architects. I was a little of both. But you know, the players, the famous players that came into the game, they brought a visibility to architecture that it didn't have before. And that's been very good for the game. And those guys certainly have a lot of talent. They do very good work.
Very, very, very grateful positions to the golf course architects like you all over the world that give us the experiences, because without them, we would not be having this great game. Thank you so much, Jeff Blume, the outgoing president.
My pleasure.
Of the American Society of Golf Course Architects. Thanks for being with me today on Match Play.
You bet. Thank you very much.
We'll be back with more Match Play right after these messages. Introducing the Putting Stroke Teacher Training Aid.
The Putting Stroke Teacher helps the better player, the PGA Tour player, the pro that wants to get out on tour, because the first thing it's going to do is get these forearms lined up square and your shoulders lined up square. And that's the thing my dad and I worked on when I led the tour in putting, and it's the thing I'm constantly checking today to make sure that those are lined up. And that's going to really affect the path that the putter head swings on. Very easy to set up. You just take two pieces, stick them together, put it on the end of your putter, two little Velcro straps, and boom, you're in and you're ready to go. It's not big, it's very tiny. You can take it apart and stick it in your golf bag. Get the Putting Stroke Teacher and make more putts.
Order the Putting Stroke Teacher today.
Are you struggling with back, neck, or shoulder pain? You don't have to suffer anymore. Introducing the Back Relief from Dr. Soothe, a therapeutic vest that provides targeted hot or cold therapy to your neck, shoulders, spine, and lower back. Just place Back Relief in the microwave for hot therapy or the freezer for cold therapy. Its compressive design will uniformly deliver soothing pain and stress relief while you enjoy all of your everyday activities. It's also washable. Don't suffer anymore. Try the Back Relief from Dr. Soothe today.
There is a place where reality exceeds your dreams, where time is not measured in days, hours, or minutes, but in smiles, new experiences, and new friends. A place where happiness is not a feeling, it's a way of life. Here, you're not just a visitor, you're family. There are many languages in the world, and our smile speaks them all.
And now back to Match Play with your host, Ray Adams.
Today it's my great pleasure and honor to welcome to the show Robert Trent Jones Jr. Mr. Jones, thank you so much for being with me. We're here at the beautiful Mountain Shadows Resort. I just had your incoming president to the Society of Golf Course Architects of America, and of course I know you're a past president as well. What a great organization. I know these are your annual meetings, and what a storied career, maybe certainly one of the most famous architects in all of history joining us today.
Our family was, I was born and brought up in New Jersey. My dad was off all the time. My mother made us go to school, Reese and myself, and do our homework. But when he came home, he had stories to tell. So we were pretty interested in what he did. We traveled with him to places like the Broadmoor, to Ponte Vedra, and that was pretty good duty in those days, in the 40s and 50s.
Did you know that you were at those places and how historic all those places were and would become?
Yes and no. We didn't know that he was creating these places and somebody or updating them. He worked at Augusta when we went into the Magnolia Lane in the days in June, July. Nobody was there, but it was like we'd entered heaven, So the answer to your question is I had no idea how the game would evolve from then to now.
Yeah. I spoke to you earlier about speaking with Jack Nicklaus on this show about the ball and about golf course design and making courses longer to accommodate the technology and the ball. And yet, of course, there's that tremendous cost he spoke about, the water, sustainability. These are all problems that designers, architects are facing today. Can you go into that a little bit and tell us some more, maybe some insights that we wouldn't think about?
Yeah, I think Jack is an extraordinary, thoughtful person, obviously one of the greatest champions of all time, if not the, it depends how you look at it. He is focused on the ball itself. I focus a little bit differently. All games are attack and defense. Jack is a consummate attacker. He's the Napoleon of the piece. Think of me as the Wellington of the piece. Or in sports talk, he's a striker in soccer, and I'm in the I'm goaltending. And the greatest strikers are not necessarily the best defenders, as Napoleon found out at Waterloo.
Yeah.
However, the point I want to make is that we think of new defenses just as a military person in World War I had a ground war to fight, World War II was an air war. So in that sense, we thought about how do we defend against these long courses. Well, at Chambers Bay, we made the greens, the whole course very hard and fast. So it wasn't only about distance, it was distance and control. How do you stop the ball to get the best angle?
Yeah.
So we think strategically. So that's one way that we architects who love the game and play the game think. In terms of the courses getting too long, I concur with Jack.
When you look at what's going on in architecture today, I know that renovation is a big word. It's a big thing happening. And how do you go back to a golf course that's 40, 50, 80, 100 years old? How do you go back and maintain the integrity and the historicity of that land, that golf course, and yet modernize it and update it for playability for today? How do you do that?
Well, that's a very complex question, and I'll try to be short. But basically, people say, aren't you upset when you have to go in and renovate or recreate your own golf course? And I say, in Wisconsin we just did one at Century World, and they said, well, weren't you upset about doing it? I said, well, I'm like a Wisconsin farmer, I get to milk the cow twice. So I know, the answer is no. I want the course to stay current. I want to think about some of the things we learned by the playing of it for many years, which we may not have seen in the original design. Yeah. And so we take the feedback from the players and the owners.
Final questions for Mr. Jones, and that is, give us your best advice as players, as golfers, men and women alike watching the show today, from Robert Trent Jones Jr. on moving forward with the game of golf. What's your best advice for us, given that we've had some slippage in the game, a little disappointment, we've lost some golfers, blah, 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 a little bit difficult of a game. Give us the best of you.
Well, briefly, the game's 500 years old. We've been through religious wars, real wars. The game has survived just fine. It may morph. My best advice is go out and play and never quit, ever. And I'm on defense and you're on offense. But secondly, we're trying to create variety. We have courses in Vietnam, Ireland, places you wouldn't have gone to years ago. So the game is morphing to Africa, to Latin America.
Yes.
And while it's maybe reducing itself somewhat in terms of the quantity of number of players in North America and Europe, the game's alive and well.
By one of the greatest of all times, Robert Trent Jones Jr., today with me on the show. Thank you,
and
sir.
Ray, we got more for you coming.
We'll be back with more match play right after these messages.
Creating a revolutionary product starts by asking, what if? What if we loaded every inch with game-changing innovation? What if we had a flight tuning system to control ball flight, roll face and cup face technologies for explosive power, slipstream sole technology for more speed, and dual carbon tech with 8 adjustable loft settings? And what if all this technology and performance costs significantly less than the competition? Exotic's EXS by Tour Edge. Pound for pound, nothing else comes close.
And now back to Match Play with your host, Ray Adams.
I want to welcome Jan Bel Jan. She is the Vice President of the American Society of Golf Course Architects to the show today. But soon on Monday, in just a couple of days, she's going to become the president of this organization. She is an outstanding golf course designer, architect, and welcome to Match Play with Ray Adams, Jan.
Thank you. So happy to be here. I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, look at this beautiful place we're at,
Fabulous.
the beautiful weather we're having. It couldn't be any better than mountain shadows.
Mountain shadows.
I have my Exotics by Tour Edge
I
Golf
like
and
it.
my Bobby Jones clothes. And I love your beautiful jacket, which is the standard for you members
It is.
of the society. Jan, in 1978 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
I think technically they call it Sewickley, at Oakmont Country Club, you sat on a patio with someone and it changed your entire career.
It did indeed.
Before we get to that though, I want to go back to your very early years and your famous family, all PGA professionals, and tell us about your dad and your brothers.
Well, my father was George Bel Jan, and he was the second youngest of 6 brothers who were all involved in golf. My 5 uncles of them 3 were PGA professionals, and there was Uncle Carl, who was at Churchill Valley Country Club. He was at Sunny Hannah for a couple of years as the head professional, which is a very famous golf course near Johnstown. Then he was at Churchill Valley, and he ended up at Tippecanoe Country Club in Ohio, which is a Donald Ross golf course.
Did you fall in love with golf and the business of golf and the game of golf and the whole surroundings of golf and know that you were going to stay in golf somehow?
I knew I was. I didn't know what it was going to be, but and at one time, because my father was a pro superintendent, I thought I might go down the superintendent avenue. But then as I learned that I could study landscape architecture and put my ideas on paper for golf course design, then I pursued that and found that one day I would be able to get into golf course architecture. So it was a dream come true that I didn't even know I had.
What were you doing before that important meeting on the patio of Oakmont Country Club near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania? What were you doing in the years before that meeting?
Well, I was working for the Davey Tree Expert Company in their lawn care division, and I was a technician and sales rep, and among my clients was the client who introduced me to Tom Fazio. That was Jack Mahaffey, who was a he was a Pennsylvania state champion, amateur champion. He was runner-up in the U.S. Amateur, and he was on the USGA Executive Committee for a while.
And that meeting on the patio at Oakmont was with Tom Fazio.
Was with Tom Fazio.
Tell me about that meeting and how that changed your life.
Well, it changed my life because Tom Fazio was interested enough in me to ask me to have a second interview with him down in Florida at his offices in Jupiter. And at that time, then he asked me if I would come to work with him.
And what was it that you were going to start doing?
I was going to start doing office work, doing the drawings, the plans, the specifications, the estimates for golf courses that he had lined up for construction. So among those were 3 courses at PGA National, including the Champion Golf Course, which was hosting the 1983 Ryder Cup. And so we did the original design work for that. And then about 4 or 5 years later, the owner of the property, Lloyd Ecclestone, asked Jack Nicklaus to redo it. And that's the golf course you know today that hosts the Honda Classic, but the original routing was a Fazio routing, and of course they changed. So it was exciting. It was very exciting.
So Jan, 20 years with Tom Fazio, and I know you learned a tremendous amount, but is there 1 or 2 things that you really took away from that when you transitioned in to then beginning your own golf course design and architecture firm?
Well, I learned everything about business and about golf course architecture and design from Tom, other than things I had read, but just observation. Tom led by example, and anybody who wants to understand how to treat people well and have a good business, you follow the kinds of principles that he did, which was being with grace and dignity toward everybody.
Yes.
But I would say that he listened to what the clients wanted. And if it may not have been what they needed, but he was able to hear what they were saying and say to them, maybe this is a better way to do it. Maybe this is something else.
Yeah.
And so I think that might be probably the thing that I treasure most, is just listening.
You then went into your own golf course design and architecture business for many years, and because of the body of your work and the quality of your work, you were invited into the American Society of Golf Course Architects many years ago as only the second woman after Alice Dye, the famous Alice Dye, Pete Dye team, of course.
Yes.
And now you're the vice president of this organization and soon to be the president in a couple of more days.
In a couple more days.
When you look at your last 20 years of work and you look at being in the society and you look at the architecture, and where is the society headed? Where is golf course architecture going?
Well, I think you know, there are a lot of conversations about golf, and many of them have to do with distance, but the distance is really for an elite number of people and a select few, as opposed to the vast majority. So although there are still golf courses that are being tweaked to add length, there are other golf courses that are creating more golf courses within a golf course.
Yeah.
So they become far more appealing to the people with the slower club head speeds. That might be juniors, that will be women, that will be seniors, and so I think it's heading in that direction. It's just becoming more appealing.
How do you balance playability for the average golfer, someone like me, with the request of the golf course owners that are bringing you on board, and they don't want to build a 6,000 yard golf course. They want to build a championship course with complex greens, and they want, you know, terrain and bunkering, and they want this to be a tournament class golf course. How do you balance that as a designer architect?
Well, I think yes, they do. They would like, as much as some would like to have a certain facility that might help host a championship, I think they're also realistic about the possibilities of that happening. So those who might actually host a championship, they will have the golf courses that are longer. But most of the people who understand that there is a group of people who support the clubs, and they understand we need these people to continue to support, and we want more people to support and enjoy. And so they welcome fresh ideas. And what they do, I think what they want as much as length, or perhaps more than length, are interesting green complexes that aren't necessarily full of bunkers, because that can also slow play and it can also add to maintenance time and budgets. But we have so we guide them and say, let's do this, and we can have all the complexes you need, make it interesting with mounds and contours and mowing heights, and not necessarily have to deal with a lot of bunkers and a lot of length.
What are some of the challenges that you face as a golf course designer architect? And then what do you do about the egos of the golfers, because they don't want to play from the forward tees? And especially we look at a golf course like Bethpage Black, there's a sign there that says this is a very difficult golf course and you have to be an expert to play here. So it's very forbidding to the average player. How do you balance all of that as a designer?
Well, it hinges on the client, because the demographics are different everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the first thing. There is not one solution for everyone in every location. It's very site-specific, very club-specific. And I think that's what's helpful, is understanding that it's a very broad audience. There are some clubs who would say, well, this course is designed specifically for people who are better players. They want to have that challenge, and we choose not to have a shorter course within our golf course. We choose not to have shorter tees. So there are a lot of elements that can be changed, even once the golf course is constructed and grown in, where they can make some differences.
Sometimes I'll be playing along at a golf course, and I'll be having a great time and loving just being there no matter where I am. And I'll come across a hole, Jan, and it's kind of weird. It's like, what were they thinking? That doesn't really belong here like that. Has that ever happened to you as a designer, where you were, for some reason, maybe it was drainage, wind, the lay of the land, the soil. Were you put in a position where you had to compromise the hole you really wanted to build, and you had to build one because of some other factors that you really ended up not liking?
Sure.
Has that ever happened?
Oh yeah, there are a lot of great 17-hole, 18-hole golf courses. Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
and sometimes it's because the lay of the land, or if it's a development issue, or if it's an environmental issue where it's just trying to make them maximize, not maximize so much as optimize.
Yeah.
And at that point, that becomes the optimum golf hole, given the conditions.
Final question for Jan Bel Jan, soon to be president of the American Society of Golf Course Architects. Jan, renovation is the big word in golf course architecture and design these days.
Right.
Tackling a golf course that's been around 50, 80, 100 years, and changing that course, renovating that golf course to be able to keep the historicity of it intact, and yet modernize that golf course for playability and sustainability. How do you do that? Is that a challenge?
It is a challenge, but again, the people the club governors who choose to have the renovations done, they already have something in mind. So if you want to preserve the history, then what part of the history are we seeking? Because if it's a 100-year-old golf course and you're not playing with 100-year-old clubs, then it's very difficult to keep the tees and the bunkers in the same places and to affect the players who might have been challenged then. But it is possible to add different tees. It's possible to keep the theme of the golf course. It may be that some of the greens back in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, even 50s were much more exaggerated than we have today because the putting green speeds were slower. Stimp meters weren't used commonly then where they are now.
Yeah.
So just leveling out some of the contours. So sometimes it's having some flatter areas where you could have put a hole location, yet have some transition areas that emulate what the original designer had been. So it's keeping the theme in mind and incorporating all the ideas that were native to the original construction, but then just updating it.
Jan Bel Jan, soon to be president of the American Society of Golf Course Architects here at Mountain Shadows. Thank you so very much. And I know under your presidency, the future is going to be very bright for us golfers and your fellow golf course architects.
I'm hoping so. That's the mission.
Thanks, Jan,
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate being here.
Fit, spend less, play better. HL4 by Tour Edge is custom fit innovation for every golfer. Dial in your game with state-of-the-art technology designed to outperform clubs costing twice as much. Hand-built in the USA, backed by a lifetime warranty, and shipped with our 48-hour delivery guarantee. Shop online or visit one of our 750 fitting locations today. HL4 by Tour Edge. Get fit, spend less, play better.